Good evening. Very good evening to you. It's 7:02 on Tuesday, June 2nd, 2020. We're at the National Palace in Mexico City. We're going to launch our daily press conference on COVID, the pandemic caused by novel coronavirus SARS-CoV-2. Today, we're going to focus on two different areas, the typical Tuesday subjects. Dr. Alomia will present the technical report and statistics for what is going on with health care professionals who have been affected by COVID. And Dr. Ricardo Cortez will be presenting the mobility report, Tuesday mobility report. And we're going to pay attention to recent things that have happened where we've been trying to lessen restrictions, which has caused mobility to increase. We're going to look at each state, and we're also going to reflect on what is coming up in terms of prevention activities. Now that we are going to hand the reins over of power to each state. And now we have a very specific target for controlling the epidemic, and that's going to happen by state now. Thank you very much, Doctor. Very good evening to all of you. Here we are. It is our nightly conference number 95 since we started giving these press conferences. Today is the second day of our new normal. Let's remember that the only difference between the new normal from the National Safe Distancing Campaign is that now the community actions that we're going to be taking, for example, safe distancing itself, and other actions that we're taking to limit mobility are not going to be homogenous over all of Mexico. Now we're going to be dealing with the risk traffic light, and week by week, we're going to see what the intensity is of actions that are going to be carried out, or on the other side of the coin, where we can lessen mobility. That's why it's important for all of us to be paying very close attention to what color the risk traffic stoplight is on each week so that each state knows how they're going to be behaving. For this week, 31 states are at red. That means that basically restrictions on mobility remain the same, just the same as the National Safe Distancing Campaign, and they're pretty much continuing in that exact same way in 31 states, with the exception of Zacatecas, which is the only state that started the week with orange on the traffic light. Let's take a look on our first slide where we see what's going on internationally with respect to the pandemic. We had an important reduction, 1 percentage point. We're going to see that on the next slide. That's 1 percentage point less compared with yesterday. We have a proportion of cases that have accumulated over the whole world, and we can also see what has been going on over the last 14 days. We can see that Europe continues to decrease in terms of the percentage of the active pandemic over there, and America still has 55%. It hasn't changed very much there, but it is also going down in general, and that represents 23% worldwide over the last 14 days. Let's take a look at the numbers in Mexico. We have 300,000 people who have been tested, 293,078 to be precise. And then we have 153,601 people who tested negative. 153,601. And then of the confirmed cumulative cases, we almost have 100,000. We're hitting 97,326 people who have taken the test and been confirmed as having COVID-19. Nevertheless, just a little less than one fifth, about 16, 18% of these people are the active cases in Mexico. So that's 16,940 active confirmed cases representing the active pandemic in Mexico. The pandemic can continue to spread. We have almost 17,000 people confirmed active right now. For deaths, it's 10,637 people who very sadly have lost their lives due to complications from COVID-19. Let's go to our next slide and take a look at the burden of disease. The cumulative burden of disease hasn't really changed much over the last couple of days, but we can see which states have more than 3,000 cases per 100,000 inhabitants. We continue to make the color darker to show that there are more cases in a state. Here we see the same information. Here we can see that Sonora is getting up into that group over on the left that are in dark maroon, and that's the cumulative burden of disease. Not all of these people are able to transmit the disease right now. What we saw in the general map was reflected in the fact that it's 16 to 18% of those people who reflect the active pandemic. Here we have much less dark color gradient. Only Mexico City has that high range, followed by the state of Mexico that has hit the second highest number of cases. But many other cases are still in a lower range of 500 or less cases confirmed over the last 14 days. Here we can see every single one of our states in descending order, and we can quickly see who has the most confirmed cases and who has the least. Here's the cumulative incidence rate map that represents the active pandemic. The darker forest green represents states that have a higher cumulative incidence rate. That means that in the last 14 days, these dark forest green colored states have higher transmission rates. We all have to be very much on top of this. We have to be very much on top of maintaining safe distancing measures. This bar graph shows the same information, but with bars. We can see the cumulative incidence rate from the last 14 days. This is from May 20th to June 2nd. But we can also see that compared with the blue bars, which shows the difference presented with a week change between them. So 2 weeks between those different bars, and we can see how things have been changing, how the incidence rate is going up and down. And we can interpret this in the same way, where the green bar is higher than the blue bar. That means that over the last 15 days, compared to the 2 weeks before that, the rate has gone up. Where we see bars that are closer together, more even, that could be like Morelos or maybe Quintana Roo. We can see that its blue bar is higher than its green bar. And that means that its incidence rate is lower. Tlaxcala has bars right beside each other as well. So the incidence rate from 2 weeks ago is similar to 2 weeks prior to those 2 weeks. So the pandemic hasn't been increasing, it's stayed stable. And then if we have the blue bar higher, that means that the incidence rate is going down. And that means that over the last 14 days, the transmission rates are also going down. That's how we can interpret this bar graph for each state. Here we see distribution of deaths by date of occurrence. We see an increase there, 924 suspected deaths. We still are waiting on the laboratory results for that. But we can see by date of occurrence how these deaths are distributed over the last 2 weeks. And this is what has been happening. This is also the deaths distributed by state. We can see in yellow at the top of each bar how it could even continue to increase depending on which state they're in. We can also see which states where the majority of deaths have happened that have been confirmed by a lab test. This is the epi curve. We continue to see that the majority of suspected cases are precisely over the last 10 days. They're concentrated over the last 10 days, and we're waiting for information from the public health laboratories to confirm that these suspected deaths are or are not COVID. And in that dark cherry bar, we can see bar colors. We can see that these are the confirmed deaths from COVID. And if we put those two bar graph colors together, we see that this tendency is still going upward. This is the cumulative epi curve for confirmed cases by a laboratory test. The increase from yesterday to today is 4.2%, representing 3,891 new confirmed cases. The yellow tiny bars at the bottom right-hand side of the slide are showing us the incidence rate there. And we'll see what happens over the weekend, what's going to be happening next Wednesday or Thursday, so we can understand what the trend is and how it is presenting itself. Let's go to occupancy rates and availability. 96%, that's a very good percentage of hospitals. The 694 hospitals in the COVID reporting statistics hospital network. We can see there's been a slight increase in occupancy rates, especially in terms of general hospitalization beds. In general, it's 44% for the whole country. Of the 22,462 beds available in the COVID hospital reporting network, and 12,687 are available. This varies depending on state, and we'll see that on the next slide. We can see the highest occupancy rate is again Mexico City, the state of Mexico, with 80% and 74% respectively. They still do have 20% and 26% respectively for availability, and we're continually working to continue to ensure availability so that these hospitals can continue to receive patients. What is ideal is that over the next few days, with hospital retrofitting, there will still be more beds available. With lesser percentages, we have Morelos, Chiapas, and Tlaxcala, but we can see that some states are now over 40% of their occupancy rates, but they still have quite a significant number of available beds. Here we see availability for beds with ventilators in the ICU. Here we can see there's a greater availability for beds, especially in states that have a high demand for this type of medical attention. Thanks to hospital retrofitting, we have increased availability for beds. We also see that it is maintaining stable in some states, and we're still seeing more beds opening up. So we can see nationally, we still have 63% availability for these types of beds. Let's see here how hospitals have increased, how many beds they have, and also the number of hospitals that have been retrofitted into being COVID-19 hospitals. We can see that over up to the last cutoff point, we had 68 that had at least some availability to attend to COVID patients. But that increase has been significant when we look at where we started, because we used to have only 645 units available for dealing with COVID-19 hospitals. So as the need has increased, so has the ability to attend to those patients. Let's take a look at how healthcare professionals have been affected by COVID-19. We update this every week. Today we have 20,217 healthcare professionals who have been confirmed to have COVID-19. But we can also see that we have 47,711 who have tested negative to the test. 10,082 healthcare professionals continue to be suspected of having COVID. So at least half of these have been added on to our number of confirmed cases. They're distributed by their classification if they've been approved or have been approved not to have COVID. If we take a look at the dark cherry bars, this is the burden of disease by state for healthcare professionals. If we take a look at the next slide, here we have the epi curve, just as we normally see for cumulative cases confirmed, but this is only for healthcare professionals. So there's 20,270 cumulated cases are represented here, and you can see in the yellow bars, as are the 10,082 suspected cases, still waiting on a result. So this epi curve, if it's going to be going down, then that will be visible when we add up the two bars together. We are still working on doing that for you. This slide represents the confirmed cases by state where the healthcare professionals live and for the last 14 days. So we can see the healthcare professionals that are representing the active pandemic in Mexico. And this represents 1/4 of the total healthcare professionals who have gotten sick during this period. And we can also see that distributed by state where their test was carried out. This is distribution by age and sex for all confirmed cases. These are for all the people who are confirmed to have had COVID, those 20,217 healthcare professionals. We can see that people between 30 and 44 represent the most concentration for the highest burden of disease there. And these younger healthcare professionals are the ones who are being affected. So we see that it doesn't really have that much to do with how old they are. But if we can just take a snapshot of how this behavior looks in the general population, we can also compare this to the age of other people who have gotten sick and see that it's concentrated more in younger people. Here's the distribution with regard to their profession or their occupation that they said that they were performing when they did this epidemiological study. So nurses represent 42%, followed by doctors at 32%. And other healthcare professionals are in the forest green bar, and those are 23%. And then, very specifically, we have laboratory workers, 2%, and dentists with 1%. These are the ones who have been affected the least. Here we have distribution by institution where the diagnosis happened. We'd actually never interpreted this bar before by telling you at which institution they got infected. This is distribution by institution where their case was confirmed. That is to say, where they did a laboratory test and they were confirmed to have COVID-19. We have to remember, though, that many healthcare professionals work at numerous institutions, including private institutions. So we're not going to be able to tell exactly where they got infected just from this bar. But here is the information for you. Obviously, the institution with the most cases is the Mexican Social Security Institute, followed by other Mexican public healthcare systems. And then we have the state hospitals. Well, we can also understand from these numbers, depending on how many people live in each hospital where they were getting tested. Here is the evolution of these 20,217 cases. The majority of them, 90%, are outpatients. even though we do have a certain number, around 10%, that is distributed over hospitals where people are intubated or where people are seriously ill. This slide shows us comorbidities for all cases that have been confirmed among healthcare professionals: obesity, hypertension, and diabetes, as we've seen, that are present in the general population and that are also the spearhead of all these comorbidities. In fourth place, smoking, 7% there. And then that's also reflected in healthcare professionals, as well as the other comorbidities that you saw below there. This is distribution of deaths. Unfortunately, 271 healthcare professionals have died due to complications from COVID-19. And here we can see that distribution in terms of the state where they very unfortunately lost their lives. We can see that there are 10 suspected deaths that we're still waiting, so that proportion still could go out. And here we have the states to see where the deaths happened. This slide also has to do with deaths, and this is the distribution by age and sex of each death that occurred. Of those 271 deaths that occurred, you can see that this is having a slight tendency toward the right, which we have also observed when we see updates from the general population in terms of age groups. And these comorbidities, especially chronic degenerative diseases, really have a lot to do with those people's deaths, especially when they're over 30 years old. Here we also have deaths by institution. This represents the institution, the hospital where they died over the last few days of their lives, where they received attention. So we have 105 with Eames and Easting and 48 after that. And that has to do with the burden of disease. This is where the largest population lives, so that's where we're going to have the highest number of deaths. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Alomia. Now, Dr. Ricardo Cortez Alcala, would you please give us the mobility report? Yes, it would be my pleasure, Deputy Secretary. Good evening to everyone. We're here at the National Palace, and we're also in your homes, maybe on your TV or your mobile device, which certainly there was a very interesting talk that I was having with a friend today, and she was asking me, how do you know that people are out in public or not? And it's not actually about us. Each of us, we have our mobile device, and whenever we acquire one of these communication devices, we buy them and we accept the terms and conditions of the contract. Or when we download an application, for example, Facebook, Twitter, when we do that, we're giving that application permission. We're giving the operating system permission. We're giving that device that we've bought, we're giving it permission for us to use our information and also for them to review our mobility. That's how I can say today I take out my phone and I say, oh, I'm in the National Palace at the press conference. And then it's registered by Facebook or it's registered by Twitter. And voila. That's how Facebook, Twitter, and Google share that information with us, totally anonymized, so that we can know what are mobility levels in each state in our gorgeous republic. These graphs, these are 32 specific graphs, and they have 4 lines on them and 2 different sets of bars. The 4 lines represent the operating system or the application that we're referring to. The blue one is the Google operating system. The orange one is Twitter, that is following you through your application. And the gray line is from Facebook. And the red one is from the goal, the established goal of 65% reduced mobility. The two bars that kind of get lost crossing each other with their thickness, there's a blue one, that's this first one, and this shows you the beginning of the Susanna Safe Distancing National Campaign on March 23rd of this very year. The green bar, that is the risk traffic light showing June 1st, which is the day, the moment, yesterday, Monday, when we started this epidemiological monitoring by way of the indicators that we get from the colors on the risk traffic light. What we can see here is how Baja California is specifically among these four states. We can see, along with Campeche, that over the last few days, there's been an increase in mobility. And what we can see in Baja California is that little by little, and I think you can see there's a trend that is on an uptick over the last couple of days. And in Campeche, even though the Twitter users had managed to pass that 65% reduced mobility over the last few days, then it increased again. And it also passed that limit that we had set. So there was mobility that was over 65%.
On this next slide, you get to see Coahuila, Colima, Chiapas, and Chihuahua. And you can draw your attention particularly to Chiapas, where in the last few days you can see an increase on the use of Twitter. And that could lead, or what will lead, to an increase on the number of cases in the upcoming 2 weeks, which is our largest incubation period for this virus. Mexico City continues to be still, as of the date of this report, with the three operating systems that we review. Our reducing goal is 65%. So let's see how on this very last day, you can see that it's slightly above 65, and it's probably what we get to see already firsthand, that we are noticing a larger mobility in our city. Definitely the number of population within the city has to do with it, but we do see an increased mobility in this important city. There's a slight movement in the different areas in an important amount of people. For Guerrero and Durango, those are two states that they have gradually increased their mobility in the past few days, and specifically in Guanajuato, where the past 3 days they sort of go back and forth in the mobility as established in their Twitter and Facebook users. And you can see how they keep incrementing the mobility in the past few weeks, at least as it is measured by Android, that you can see in the orange line, that in the past week had increased considerably. In Hidalgo, mobility has continued to remain flat after we had established the safe distance campaign and different strategies like restricting vehicle mobility and others. And Facebook users in the past few days have registered a decrease in their mobility. And what you can see in specifically Hidalgo and many others as well, but in this one in particular, you can see how it increases and reduces constantly through its Facebook users. And we hope that those are people who actually just work in as essential workers in Hidalgo, or that are probably on a working schedule Monday to Friday and have the weekends off. In Estado de Mexico, we continue to see a very flattened curve, very close to 65%, that we continue to monitor very, very closely, given how we get to see an increase in the mobility in the metropolitan area. In the state of Jalisco, we have kept mobility as well, specifically for Twitter users, specifically lower to 65%. It's a small increase in the past few days, as well as in Google users that have an increasing tendency. And if you look at the presentation from Dr. Alomia, you can see an, an increase in the number of cases from 2 weeks period to this one. In the states of Morelos, Nayarit, Nuevo León, and Oaxaca, they show very low mobility in the different operating systems that are being surveilled. And in Nayarit, after many, many efforts on the end on the citizens' end, specifically on the Twitter users, they surpassed the 65% goal, reaching interesting levels like minus 80%. We hope that this can be translated that the pandemic has been contained in Nayarit. Next one, please. Puebla, Querétaro, Quintana Roo, and San Luis Potosí. And here I would like to delve on the data from San Luis Potosí. They had a rising trend in the past few weeks, but in the last 5 days, they have showed an important decrease in their mobility. And as of June 1st, you can appreciate how it continues, how mobility continues to decrease, and how Facebook and Twitter continue to be monitored at the low end, and we hope that it continues to have a low trend from now on. And states that are reliant, like Quintana Roo, that rely on hospitality, and they have had a mobility pretty much lowered or close down to zero now in our country, but other parts of the world, they do have a mobility rate quite diminished. And we do hope that this mobility contention helps the state of Quintana Roo to reduce their emergency and the risk to continue to exhibit symptoms from coronavirus, that they can go back to their regular activities. The state of Sonora and Tamaulipas, we can see how in the last few days they have increased their activities, specifically on Twitter users, which can lead to believe that in the next 14 days there can be an increase in the number of cases, and to see if these particular mobilities were not done with the considerable restrictions and with all the necessary actions so that the transmission for SARS-CoV-19 was held back. Tlaxcala and Zacatecas, they do show a small increase in their activities. Zacatecas had already accomplished an important diminish after having had an extraordinary promotion of the safe distance campaign on the government's end, specifically in Zacatecas. Here we would like to take a moment to give a call out to the population of that particular state that achieved an important reduction of the mobility in your entity, and we are asking you for you to do it again, so that this is not translated in a negative effect in the way we handle the pandemic, and that you continue to have positive numbers, and that the number of confirmed cases does not continue to grow. In Tlaxcala, you can see a small increment on the Twitter users, which could mean, as we have seen before, could lead to an increase of the number of confirmed cases. This will be my last slide, in which you get to see how in the last 2 weeks, in our week-to-week chart, we only have two, pretty much three, are the ones who show a decrease on the mobility, which are Puebla and Nayarit. Jalisco, it's basically flat at zero mobility, but from there on, the rest of the states have an increasing trend on mobility. In each and every single one of them, we emphasize specifically the ones highlighted in red to the left of the screen. All those states continue to show an important increase of their mobility on a week-to-week comparison on a number of weeks for 2 weeks each time. Thank you very much, Doctor. And let's go back to question and answers. I'm not sure if you, Salazar, were able to do your question, but you had a pending answer on my end. Thank you, Doctor. Yes, again, I had an answer pending on your end. So for two of my questions, you already gave me the information, but what was pending was talking about people who were released from this particular disease, and specifically those who were on ventilators, and the flattening curve for Chiapas, if you were to have it. Hopefully, you'll get to show it to us. And also talking about people who have been recovered, how are they classified in terms of people who survived with pre-existing conditions like hypertension, diabetes, and others? How this disease were manifested in their recovery? What's the scenario for that particular moment? Thank you, Doctor. I appreciate it very much. So Dr. Alomia will answer this question. Well, particularly with the patients that have needed a ventilator or just to have an a tube, when you are intubated, actually that's a very bad forecast because it's within this forecast that we take this decision, because around 30% of the patients that have been tubed, they actually survive long enough for them to get the tube removed. And so after that, when they do recover for the upcoming days, they can either survive just fine or they get to fall back onto the prior condition that required the tube. But to be honest, the ratio for this is very, very low. And those who had needed a tube and those who have survived, full recovery percentage is really low. And I would say that it's between 25 to 30% exclusively. The rest, the other groups that lies between a 60 to 95%, they have unfortunately passed away. Thank you. Monica, please. Doctor, talking on the meeting that you had with the different governors of state, why didn't they know the different indexes that they were going to use? We do have an official paper that says that they will now have access to it. Did they not have access to it before? Or were they just informed that they were on the red color on the red stoplight? And is it true that they needed further economical resources, and did you or anyone on your work actually stated that this was the worst moment of the pandemic? Well, today, June the 2nd, we had one of our repetitive meetings of the governor's meetings that we do held consequently with Dr. Sheinbaum and others. And we did talk about COVID-19, which was the main reason we have this meeting, and other different concerns on the end of the doctor and Dr. Graciela Oxer, who is also our economy secretary and has already covered that particular topic because that was part of the different concerns. This stoplight was touched on May 26th. we were waiting on the colors and the different interpretations for it and the classification that we gave them. And the second one was the chart for proper interventions for each color and different rates. Some of the governors were not very, very clear about it, and that's not their fault when you're having a meeting. Some of them, there's something that might not have been touched on or it's not fully explained. Whoever is the main speaker should explain them once again, and that's exactly what happened this particular Tuesday. What we said that as a top security measure, the stoplight has four colors and in terms for indexes, and whenever any given color is at its top level, in which this case is red, which is top rest, it could be the orange or the yellow one. If one of those particular indexes is at its top level or it's above the other three, we should take as a final result the top index one for the entire stoplight, at least on its deployment stage. And we do take this measure as a sanitary measure because as a country, we're still on a trial basis on how we're going to move on to the new normality mode. Here, I would like to highlight something that I believe hasn't been completely cleared for the population. The pandemic is not over. COVID-19 pandemic is still on. And definitely, something did say that it's at its top level, and that was me. The pandemic is at its highest intensity level. We do have the metropolitan area of Mexico City, which has the largest number of cases concentrated and the largest number of beds occupied and the largest toll death rate. We do have the trend that has been held up towards the lower end of flattening the curve as we presented last Monday, but still the speed of reduction is not quite clear. And this definitely clears what we said on Monday, that the number of cases that we look on this particular stage is the decreasing stage. The decrease tends to be slower than the increase. And so the increase gets to happen very, very fast, but the decrease continues to be a progressive decrease. And we did say this, and most governors and the two and the governess and Mrs. Sheinbaum, we said that we believe that we needed to highlight this particular situation. It's definitely something to be taken care of with high level of precaution. Hats off to all my governors. It's a great sense of responsibility that they have showed over their social responsibility for their population and on their own governments. This is very hard to balance and to have a happy medium on both, which is not very, very easy to achieve. So what we decided, and the governor for Baja California Sur, Dr. Carlos Mendoza Davis, who is the CONAGO's president, he tweeted 4 times today specifying that each Tuesday we will share what is the number for their stoplights for the state. It's a single stoplight for the entire nation, but the number corresponding to every single state will be different depending on what the state of the pandemic is for that particular region. So between Monday and Tuesday, we will have an open dialogue, and if at any given point, if any governor has a different perception of the highlight, whether that's because of any given reason or their different cabinets and their different teams perceive it differently, then we should talk about it and we should find what would be what it is it that we don't agree on and find the correct answer. So what happened is that by Thursday we will have a single stoplight with the different opinions of the governors, and then we will make it public on Friday. Our commitment to not introduce any type of confusion in the different um, on the different states. We will not have a final official answer until Friday once the conversations have been held and over with. If at a given moment any given governor do not have any further opinions, then we will consider the matter as solved and again will be presented on Friday. If there is going to be a single highlight for the nation, why did Conago say that Mexico City has its own stoplight? So I find that as a very good idea. 2 weeks ago on Friday, we had a call out for the six state governors and Dr. Sheinbaum as well. And we did have a similar meeting where we had different technical matters touched on COVID-19. And most of the people who showed up for this particular meeting had an opinion that because that the megalopolis has a large concentration of economy and a large concentration of people, goods, and different types of commodities, it would be worth to be considered as a single region so that we would avoid to have different appreciations of the stoplight because of different situations in the given pandemic. That would lead that a higher transmission that the high transmission on the different states would be affected by others. This particular question was left unanswered, but today Mr. Omar Fayad, Mrs. Sheinbaum, and other governors stated that it would be worthwhile to find on it. Whatever their decision may be, this is it, and we think it's a good idea. Thank you, Monica. You go. Hello, my name is Sandra from Grupo El Arce Comunicaciones. Dr. Cattell, in different countries, they have introduced docilizumab as an agent to treat COVID-19. I would like to know if this is considered in the official protocol for our country to treat COVID-19. Different doctors from private hospital are saying that it's worth acquiring. Their public is 9,000 pesos and it's being sold up to 30,000 pesos in the dark market. Oh, wow. Well, the answer is absolutely not. This particular agent does block the inflammatory reaction, and so it just blocks it and contains it. We did look at it at clinical essays where we do have Mexican researchers involved. The coordinator for this particular stage actually led one of these clinical trials. As far as I know, the results have not been published yet, just as rendesivir and hydroxychloroquine in the past. That's not an authorized nor a recommended medicine to treat COVID-19 in Mexico. We do have a technical guide on what would be potential use of what is the efficacy yet to be tested of different medicine that need to be looked at under certain conditions and different characteristics of the patients that at some given point may be desirable to be used. But right now, that particular one is not recommended right now, even though what it could be said on it, the scientific appreciation on its chemical component, it's important to look at it holding the different stages. So we do need to look at the different viewpoints of the different pharmaceutical companies. We need to see how, when we look at it directly, we can draw general conclusions. But this is not true for every single case. We do need to draw general knowledge and general results, so we don't need to have any type of speculation. This is why we hold clinical trials every single time. Thank you. You go, please.
Secretario, si pudiera comentarme,
Good evening,
ahorita también presentaron una tabla donde Chiapas, por la
Dr.
cuestión de
Gatel.
movilidad,
You
puede presentar
also
un
showed a
incremento en
table in
contagios. Usted
which
está comentando
Chiapas,
que
because of its
seguimos
mobility,
todavía arriba,
could
en
show
todavía
an
no
increased
baja ahora sí que la
transmission rate.
curva.
You
De
still have, you
presentarse
literally just
contagios
said
en
that
las
the
grandes
curve continues to
construcciones que
increase.
están iniciando en el sureste, como el Tren Maya, que se está
What
llevando a cabo en
if
Quintana
the
Roo, en Chiapas, en estas
undergoing
zonas
labor for the
muy
Tren
que tienen
Maya
muchos
in the
contagios?
southern part of the region continue to
La
have
recomendación
workers
sería
on it?
parar esa
What
obra
would be
durante el
your
tiempo
recommendation?
necesario. O
Should
sea,
we
no sé
stop
si ha visualizado
that
usted
particular
en determinado
action?
momento, esperemos que no, pero si llegase a pasar, aunque sea
Hopefully,
una
hopefully
reactivación
not, but
económica, que esa
um,
obra se tenga que
even if it
detener.
is
Y
an
otra
economy
pregunta
matter,
rapidísimo,
do
si
you
me lo
think that
permite.
that particular
Usted
action
mismo ha
should
comentado y
be
han
stopped?
dicho que
And then another very quick
se ve más
question.
movilidad en la
You have
ciudad y lo
also said
podemos
it
apreciar.
before. We do have
¿Cuál
a
es su
higher
llamado a
mobility
esas
rate
tanto
in Mexico
pequeñas como
City.
grandes empresas
What would be
que
your
sin ser
message for
esenciales,
either
ya
the
sea por cuestión
SMEs or the
económica o
larger
porque piensan que ya
corporations
el
that
domingo
whether
ya
they
se
are
acabó
not
todo,
essential
ya están
or
abriendo
whether
sus
they
puertas?
believe that this
O
is
sea,
over, they
¿cómo
are just
hacerles entender
reopening their
que, como
businesses?
usted mismo ha dicho,
How can we
pues
get them to
el
understand, just
coronavirus
like
sigue aquí
you
y va a
said
seguir aquí
before, that the
un
pandemic
buen rato
continues
con
to be
nosotros?
on and
Gracias.
coronavirus
Gracias por
continues
sus
to be present
preguntas.
and will be present for a
Sobre
very long time?
El Tren Maya como
Thank
obra
you.
es igual que
On
cualquier
Tren
otra
Maya,
y los protocolos de seguridad
as a
sanitaria
construction
se implantan. Así
project,
ocurrió en la
it's just
construcción
like
del
any other.
aeropuerto Felipe
And
Ángeles
the
en Santa Lucía y así ocurrió y ha estado ocurriendo
and the
con la
different
construcción
sanitary
de la
measures are
refinería de
in
Dos
place, just
Bocas.
like in the airport
Desde el
in
inicio
Toluca
quedaron
and in
sentadas como
other,
en
like the
parte del
refinery
repertorio
in Dos
de
Bocas.
las actividades
They were
esenciales
established
y
as
en
essential
condiciones que
activity,
cumplan con los protocolos
and
de seguridad
our
sanitaria.
only
En un
condition is
momento
that
dado,
they
cualquiera de
respect
estas obras
the
o cualquier otra,
sanitary measures that we
donde se
established.
identificara
If
un
at a
brote,
given
se
time
hacen las
or
medidas de
any other,
control del
if
brote,
a
que
breakout
pueden
was to
incluir,
be
si el brote
detected,
está fuera de
then we
control,
will take
la suspensión
actions
temporal de actividades
to
o pueden
stop it.
no
And if it
necesitarse
needed,
la
because it
suspensión
was the
temporal de
only solution
actividades
at that
dependiendo de la
moment, then we
magnitud
will close it
de
down or to have a reduction
epidemia
of
localizada,
its
de brote.
um,
El
project,
llamado, el
depending on
llamado,
how
y les
localized it
pido
is.
atenta
What is my
y
message? Well,
respetuosamente nos ayuden a difundirlo,
I do
es la epidemia no
respectfully
se ha
and
acabado.
politely
Nos
ask
queda muy claro que
to
una
spread out
proporción
the word
importante
that
de
the
la
pandemic
población
it's not
está ya
over.
cansada, está
We
sofocada
do
por
understand that
lo
a
que implica
larger
este
number of the
periodo
population is already
anormal
tired
de la
and
vida
probably
pública y de la vida
surpassed
privada también.
by
Vivir
living in a different
confinados
condition of
en el
our
domicilio,
regular
seguramente en una
life, like
convivencia muy,
just
muy
being
estrecha
constrained,
con personas que
maybe
aunque
with a
sean
very,
parte
very
de la
close
familia,
connection with
no
people
se
that,
tenía la costumbre
even
de estar
though they
todos los
might be
días
your
quizá
family,
a toda
you
hora
are not
con
acquainted with
tanta
having to
proximidad,
spend your entire
genera
day with
estrés,
such a
genera
large number of
agotamiento,
proximity.
genera
And that does develop
sentimientos
on
diversos
stress, exhaustion,
que a veces no
and
son tan
different other
positivos
feelings.
para la
And
convivencia
those
cotidiana.
feelings may not be as
Pero
positive
posiblemente más
for
que
our
eso
daily
está presente
basis.
la necesidad. Hemos dicho
But
una,
above
otra,
that,
otra,
we
100
do
veces,
have
120
a
veces,
major
200 veces,
concern.
muchísimas
We have
veces,
said it
que
100,
es claro
200,
que en
or
México una gran cantidad de la
even more
población
times.
vive al día.
It's very, very clear
Necesita
that in
tener el
Mexico,
sustento diario, lo
we
consigue
do
día a día,
have
porque vende un
a
producto,
considerable amount of
porque ofrece
people
un
who live
servicio, porque realiza una
on their
actividad
daily
concreta
income and
que
they
se
are
paga,
relying
no
upon
por
that
un salario
daily
fijo,
income.
sino por
They do
una
not have a fixed
remuneración económica
salary,
inmediata.
but they do have
Muchísima
a
gente ha
different
perdido sus
type of
empleos
payment that is done
y
on a
esos
daily
empleos
basis.
temporales son
We
los
do
que
have a large
más
number of
afectados están, los
unemployment,
empleos
specifically the
informales, como se le
temporary
conoce en
unemployment
la
sector.
economía. Entonces, nos parece entendible que a
So
la
we do
menor
definitely understand that that
perspectiva
particular
de
circuit
oportunidad
of
de
the
salir,
labor
las
market
personas deseen
do
hacerlo
see this as an
porque lo necesitan.
opportunity to go out
Habiendo
and
dicho
just
eso,
go back to
desde el
earning their
punto de
money.
vista del
And we
control
understand that and
epidémico,
they
me
do it.
dirijo ahora
So having said this, we
respetuosísimamente a la
understand it.
población,
I
es muy
respectfully address the
importante
population now and
mantener
tell you
un poco
it
más,
is very, very
insistir un poco
important to
más,
hold on.
en la medida de lo
Please
posible,
hold
no
on
salir
a
a la vía
little bit
pública
more.
para
As
evitar
much as it is
contagiar
possible for
o
you,
ser
please
contagiado.
stop going
Y
out
en ese
either to
sentido,
transmit
lograr
or to
tener
expose
un
yourself to
mejor
transmission.
dominio de la
And so
epidemia
that
a
we
lo
can
largo
get to
de los
control the
siguientes
pandemic in a better
semanas,
way in the
concretamente
upcoming
por lo
weeks.
menos hasta el 15 de
Specifically,
junio,
at
en
least
donde
until
anticipamos que
June
varias de las
15,
curvas epidémicas,
in which we
destacadamente
forecast
la de
that
la Ciudad de
several of the
México y
pandemic
la zona
curve,
metropolitana en el
specifically
Valle de
the one for
México,
Mexico City
tendrán ya
and its
un
metropolitan
declive,
area
un
in the Valley of
descenso, una
Mexico, will be in its flattening point and a sustained flattening that so that the pandemic outbreak will not come back. Natalia, please. Thank you. Good evening, doctor. I want to ask you if you could please go in further details. What are the different parameters that you're taking into account to change the color for the stoplight? All right, so the guidelines for this are four. Number one is the pandemic intensity that is shown on the trend on the number of cases. So when we talk about the trend is if we have today 10 and tomorrow 15 and the day after tomorrow 20 and then 40, we have an increasing trend. The numbers are going up. Or it could have a stable trend, 25, 26, 24, and then again 25. Even though there's very small variations, there's a flat tendency. Or there could be a decrease, 30, 20, 18, 2, and 0. That would be the first parameter. Number two would be a little bit more of the same model, but for bed availability. So if the number of people entering into a hospital continues to increase or decrease, continue to be taken into account. These two are the most important ones because those are the ones that present the challenge to take action on it because it represents what is the availability for our healthcare system to take care of people who may need it. And then number three would be um, full occupancy on the beds and hospitals. We have monitored this since the beginning, and we take the numbers from the ICU and the general beds as well, and we come up with a ratio with different representation in percentages, like 60% of general beds. I'm sorry, the ICU ones and 40% for the others. We cannot hear the question. Sorry, she does not have a microphone. I cannot give you an example because I would be in violation of our agreement of not giving the official answer of the stoplight until Friday, as it was agreed upon. And our fourth index would be the positive rate, which is the one we present every single week. So this percentage is an indirect response of the pandemic behavior for SARS-CoV-19. And different ratios will continue to emerge in terms of the positiveness of it on the different states as the transmission rate decreases versus other viruses and other reasons for infections in airways that have been present throughout this time continue to be predominant above SARS-2 COVID-19. The idea or the general idea for this stoplight is to present what the scenario is in the different general cases, in its viral cases, and others. All the indexes are here and are presented every single day. We just analyze them a little bit further. And before this conference is over, I would like to take a moment to thank CONACYT and other groups from private education, from private schools and public centers just like CONACYT, because all of this very intricate work that was designed and led us to have an operational and simple program for this stoplight based on the very highly sophisticated question that we demanded from them was because of them. I do not want to let this go by. And I do want to thank you, not at a personal level, not for my colleagues, but for everyone that is involved in this situation. Hats off to the healthcare workers. You have continued to work persistently, heroically, in every single corner in the country, in the hospitals, not only doctors and nurses who are our main actors in this play, but thank you to the laboratory personnel and everyone. And I hadn't touched in a while on the personnel for the National Institutes of Health and the Federal Institutes for Reference that, along with IMSS, ISTE, PEMEX, CEMAR, and other institutions on social activities and state hospitals and private hospitals as well, do your job in this particular role that you have been assigned for all of us. It is 8 o'clock on the dot, and this is where we end. We will see you tomorrow. Thank you very much.